Welcome, listeners, and today we have a special guest, Alan Albrecht. Welcome, Alan.
Thanks for having me.
So this is going to be a really fun episode because Alan's an engineer.
Personally, I love engineers just because, again, it's a partnership, right? And we want to rely on them. They want to rely on us. When we're having those conversations, and sometimes they're difficult conversations with the client, it's great to have a partner to pull into the conversation and to lean on and to support us in what we're trying to communicate to the client. So from my viewpoint, yeah, the fact that there's guys out there specializing in structural engineering or civil engineering or mechanical or whatever it is, to lean on an engineer, I think is just invaluable. So,
Alan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how much you love engineering, and we can go from there.
Yeah, so I've been in the Columbus market for about 19 years. I moved here in 2005. Prior to that, I ended up attending Central Michigan University and then Michigan Technological University is where I got my engineering degree from and graduated in 2004.
Yeah.
Are you from Michigan originally?
Yeah, from the Detroit area.
Okay. So then is Columbus like a bit of is your family all up in Michigan still?
Yeah, they're still up there.
I'm just
so
curious.
I know,
the Columbus thing, you landed in Columbus, obviously.
So you're a college football fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, growing up in Detroit, especially in the 90s and that, football wasn't really our thing, but hockey was, so I grew up liking that. And so I didn't get into the whole rivalry here.
But Red Wings, Chicago, the rivalries with the Red Wings, you're definitely up to speed on that.
Oh, absolutely. It was hockey town in those days, and to me it still is. I do enjoy the Blue Jackets here in town. They're a great team to pull for. From my standpoint, it wasn't so much Michigan and Ohio State, it was Michigan and Michigan State.
Yeah.
Since I've been here, people have tried to convert me, and you know what? I'd rather be your punching bag and stay true to my roots.
To where you're from. Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't know that about you. It's like we've worked together on a few projects, but yeah, I don't even know. Like, how did you meet? Did you meet Nick or Nick seek you out? Was that part of the backstory too?
So I remember, I was thinking about this recently, the first time I spoke to you, Nick, it was about a year and a half ago. I was on spring break. I was out in Vegas with my family, and you
Sounds
called me
about right.
for a project.
Nick's the partier. It's just wherever there's a party, there's Nick. Hey, Nick, nice to meet you.
Yeah, so I just remember we talked about a project for Nesters, and I'm not sure if that's something that I worked on for you or if it was just that was the meet and greet, and then we waited until we had something that fit a little bit better. But I don't know. That's where we first started talking, and I don't know.
I think I actually got your number from a client of ours. Yeah.
Yeah. So then after school, you were up in Michigan. How did you land then in Columbus? Did you stay up there for a while, then you relocated here at a certain point?
Yeah, so after school, I got a job in Michigan. Mutually wasn't the best fit, and so ended up separating ways and looking for other employment. Found an opportunity down here that focused on residential construction and took that opportunity, moved down here and worked for them, and still have the same role with different company that they were bought out, but still have that role. And in the meantime...
So you've been there for how many years now?
It's been the 19 years that I've been down here.
Yeah, jeez.
There's a commitment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's both on my end, but also on theirs, that they take care of me and they make it worthwhile for me to do
So
things.
you primarily do residential?
That's definitely my focus and my niche. Yeah, it's not so much the occupancy for me, it's more what materials are being utilized. I certainly specialize in wood construction. I can do a little bit of steel and concrete, but those take longer. I'm set up to handle wood construction, so anything, whether it's commercial or residential, if it's utilizing wood as the primary building component, then that's where my specialty is.
I feel in school they always scared us with concrete because it's like steel. Your beam starts to fail. It has a yielding point. It's bending. It's not failure is imminent.
Yeah, but
it's not instant. Wood, it's similar, right? There can be some sag and some other stuff. But the teachers in school, I just remember that sticking out to me for whatever reason. It's like alarm bells because if you mess up, it can be like explosive. Like it's just going to fail and that's it. There's no warning. It's goodbye.
Yeah, if you think about it, concrete, while we think about it as a material, it's an assembly. You have to have your rebar, you have to have your, not even just the concrete itself, but the aggregate, the water mixture, everything has to be just right for it to achieve the strength that it's designed to do. And if any of those components are wrong, then you get that catastrophic failure that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think on any large superstructures, you certainly have to have a steel component a lot more. We see a lot of innovations on the commercial side of things just for safety code and leading the industry, but doesn't really hit the residential quite as fast, if at all, in some cases. So can you speak, Alan, to some of the things that are happening in the residential side that are innovative in terms of building materials?
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that I see, it's not so much that it's new, it's maybe different adaptations of existing products. LVLs, engineered wood, again, that's where I've cut my teeth over the years, but that's been around for 40, 50 years in some capacity or another. But now what I'm seeing is actually they're finding ways to treat that product. So now it can be used in exterior applications. The biggest change with wood is not so much in the single family residential, but multifamily. And it's called CLT, where it's cross-laminated timber, where you're taking essentially 2x4s and stacking them in alternating patterns, almost like giant plywood. Because plywood, you would take thin veneers and you would alternate the direction so you get higher strength.
Yeah.
Now you actually see the strands of the fiber laid in a certain way, and then you see other ones laid in another direction.
Yeah, you're going to take a sheet and then rotate the next one 90 degrees and so on. CLT is the same thing, except instead of sheets, you're taking 2x material that's plain down, smooth, and so it might be, a 3-layer material might be 4 inches thick, and that is allowing. You talked about sustainability with concrete versus steel. CLT is being used to actually replace steel in structures.
Yeah. Have you followed any of the wood skyscraper structures that they've built? I watched a little bit on some of them. People say they're funny. They smell like popsicle sticks. Like when it's being built, not the final thing. But because it's all this engineered wood process that basically goes into it that then gets assembled on site. And so it's all prefabricated, shows up, and they just assemble it. But I think Milwaukee, I believe, there's actually a wood.
The Ascent building.
Okay.
Yeah, there's actually
So you keep up a little bit on some of that?
Yeah, there's a documentary on that building on YouTube that was pretty good watch. And there's an organization called Woodworks. It's a government organization, and they do a lot of sponsoring to help increase the wood usage throughout the country in different aspects. It's pretty well saturated in the single-family residential market, so they're looking for ways to utilize wood more in larger
Commercial
applications or multifamily, and CLT is something that they are very highly advocating. And
how does that price out? Does that make sense financially?
So pricing, I don't really know. I stay away from that, but I've talked to some of the presenters in different seminars that I've gone to, and it's really not until you get above maybe 5 or 6 stories that application, the repetitiveness of that product really starts to show.
Up. Yeah.
And here in Columbus, most of our multifamily stuff is maybe a podium and 4 stories, so you can just it's all stick built.
We just got zoned in. Yeah. All those corridors now many of them can go up to 12 stories.
Yeah, with the affordable housing kicked in. So We'll see. I think it's still going to take 10. I mean,
Sure.
I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful, but it's going to be a while before anything happens. Because we've worked on, even to date, we've worked on a few projects that are actually in the corridors. What are they doing? They're not big players. They're not demoing and redeveloping, and they're basically keeping with the building. And
there's a few developments where they're knocking some buildings down and doing 50 apartments.
But if you're talking about 7% of the Columbus footprint, that's the corridor footprint that they changed with the zoning. And of that, how much is under like you said, a few projects?
Yeah. So you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. So we'll see. But I would be excited to see taller buildings and to see some people using some different materials in construction. So I feel like concrete gets a bad rap too for the kilns drying out everything. They say it's whatever, destroying the environment. Or the embodied carbon or whatever it is.
Yeah, I've seen numbers. I think it's 8% of the global emissions comes from the production of concrete
from our industry.
Yeah, but we use concrete in a majority of the buildings, so there's more concrete used, significantly more. So I think the footprint, if it was 1-to-1, it'd be actually a little bit less. My understanding.
And I think it's also a carbon sink, right? Doesn't it absorb carbon?
I think it can. I think you can put additives in there where it becomes absorbing, or they can do it where it can even clean the air to some extent, or maybe that's just the absorption. But there's ways that you can make concrete better. It's just a matter of, do the economics still work with it?
Yeah. Alan, in terms of projects, what do you think your favorite project is that you've worked on with us?
I've worked with a number of different architects over the years, you find their sweet spot. You guys are all over the map. You're taking on a lot of different projects, a lot of diversity. So
Is that a compliment?
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
no, as an engineer, I think sometimes I get bored doing the same thing over and over. So having that, exactly, having the challenge, having that diversity in project is sometimes I want to sit down and just, okay, I don't want to think about it. I just want to do something I've done 1,000 times. But other times, like, man, this is actually fun. It's really pushing me to expand what my knowledge base is.
Alan, I feel the same way. If I had to do the same house every single day, I would go bananas. But no, some of these new custom builds we've been doing are a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh, I think that was part of the problem with my first job, like out of school myself. It's just like the repetitive nature of it. So it's like, yeah, it was part of a team, but the way the firm was set up, everybody specialized in a certain thing. Right. And it's like you could get a little bit outside, just a little bit. But if you got too far, they would start pulling you back in.
Yeah. And that's why I like this industry is, I work on single family residential, but I can look at 3-4 houses a day and move on to the next one. And every house does present its own challenge.
Yeah.
So there's some nuances to each one. I have friends that are engineers and they're doing large multi-million-dollar projects and they're going to look at 3 projects a year.
Yeah.
So being able to switch gears and make that change to me is, I think, what's kept me stable in my role and with my company and not really seeking anything else because I'm getting that diversity. Maybe it's the same type of project, but it's at least a different appearance of it.
Yeah. So not necessarily a certain project, but more just the variety of projects that we provide.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
I think that's part of Nick over here. He's a little bit like, yeah, sure.
Shiny object.
Yeah. And then he's, hey, Paul. And it's like, we've done, sure, Nick. Then I have to sit down and same thing. I got to think about it. We can do it this way. We have this and this to look at. And, so it's always like figuring out the path. And Nick's just, yes.
To Alan's point, when you get to work on different things, it exercises your brain. It makes you more in demand, Paul.
It's true.
You're welcome.
It's true.
It's only been a short time that we've been working together, but working with Nick, almost feel like I'm talking to a customer at some point because I have a conversation. He said, I got this project. We're going to do this. Can we do it? And we talked about this a little before we started recording that my answer is almost always, yeah, you can do this. It's a matter of what are the economics? Does it give you the value that you wanted as an owner?
And that's a conversation that sometimes has a little back and forth because it's not just necessarily.
It's like anything. Look at your car or look whatever house. It's if you want it, you want that beautiful patio space with some overhang, and you got to structure the roof overhang. However, maybe you have to use steel or something because you're cantilevering out. If that's what you want, that's what you want. Like sometimes you pay more than the value you get out of it just because that's what you want.
Sometimes we bring in the client's realtor to say, hey, look, if this is not our forever home or whatever, we want to be smart about this investment. Does it make sense to do this, or are we going to get just as much or close to enough value by doing that?
Yeah. So, yeah. I think from the investor side, the conversation changes quite a bit.
Sure.
So you actually said you had some rental properties too at some point, right?
Yeah. Shortly after I moved into town, I bought my own personal house. I think it was 2006 and lived there for a while and started.
How old were you when you bought? So you bought the house first. What was your first property?
Were you like 12?
You don't look that old, Alan. But I think most people wait quite a bit before they buy their first property, especially now with the way the economy is.
Yeah, I certainly pushed my finances to the edge as in order to get it. But I moved here. I was renting, exploring the area, figured out where I wanted to be. Also, the job I had at the time was on the west side of the city, but was moving to the east side. So I needed to take some time to figure things out. But I just realized, and it was also during that whole house flipping craze on TV and
flip this house, flip that house.
The 90s, 2000s, and 2000 teens.
Flippers are flipping on HGTV. Flip this, flip that. Yeah. I know pretty much exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and so I'd watch them. I was interested in how they turn out. But I was like, from an investment side or from a financial side, you do all the work and you get a return once.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, if you just could keep it, you could get the return over every month.
Buy and hold.
Yeah. So I bought my first house. I think I was 24 when I bought it in Gahanna, and I ended up having roommates for a number of years to help pay the bills or pay. Basically, I paid all the bills, and then the money that I got
paid you rent.
Yeah, the rent that I got, I was able to put back into the house and renovate, a master bathroom, a kitchen, and landscaping, all that type of stuff. And I grew up being handy and being interested in all that, so I enjoyed doing the work. Now, unfortunately, my life's with a family. I don't have the opportunities to do it myself.
It's hard to do everything.
And that's why we got out of the rental business altogether, was just what I'm doing with my engineering. And again, having a wife and daughter, it became too much work to maintain the rentals as well. But yeah, I think I bought my first rental 2011. And then
I forget, do you still have your portfolio, or did you?
No, we ended up divesting it right before the pandemic.
Okay.
Sold them off one by one as people moved out of them. And for me, what I realized is that having one rental wasn't a big deal. We had 3, and it was at that point because I was managing them. My wife was doing all of the leasing and tenant communication.
It's a part-time job.
Yeah, and it was a challenge to keep up with all that, as I said, with everything else. And I almost feel like if I could have gotten to 8 or 10 where I could start farming off some of the maintenance and hiring somebody else to do some of that type of stuff and still made the finances make sense, maybe there was a breaking point where it gets a little bit easier from
I
that
wish I
side.
knew you, Alan. We would have found you a property manager, and pivoted. But listen, you took your profits. You shouldn't be criticized for taking profits on an investment.
No, I mean, we use that to renovate our house that we're living in, and it's a beautiful house, and my wife pretty much ran all the construction and made sure that we were getting what we wanted out of it. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. Should we mention, so the flipping stuff, the HGTV stuff, do you want to blow his mind a little bit, your beach going stuff?
You are sitting with a HGTV
he was actually
reality TV show participant.
Really?
Yeah. Sarah, his wife and him, Sarah and Nick, were actually on what was it, Beach Flip or what was it?
Beach Flip.
Beach Flip, yeah. So he was on one of the flipping shows. I watched it religiously when he was on it.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
You were one of the 5 people who did.
Yeah. But so now you gotta go look this up.
I was gonna say, is the link gonna be posted underneath this podcast?
I don't know if we can. We post the link to that?
I think you can buy it for the whole season for $9.
Yeah. It was fun to watch. There's a lot of things that I don't know if the show writers wrote into the script that fit Nick's personality and character, but there were moments in the show where there was controversy with Nick, and I was laughing so hard, I was crying. It was just okay, I'm one of the 5, but it was great. I loved it.
Yeah, that was me behaving myself because I was being filmed.
So I still feel you got robbed from that. But
thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
No, we still stay in touch with everyone on the show. It was a great experience, so we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that was what year? It was in Georgia?
Down in Birmingham, Alabama.
Or Alabama. Yeah.
Some beautiful Gulf Shore beaches. Yeah, unbelievable down there. Had no idea, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, when you mentioned all the flipping shows, all of a sudden I was like, oh yeah, Nick did that for a while.
Yeah. I can't remember how long ago that was. 10 years.
I was still in Chicago. Yeah. It's been a little bit.
Yeah, wild.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you think you'll get back into any property investment stuff, or you think you were into it, then you got out of it?
Yeah, that's a great question.
So now I'm just curious, you had you dipped your toe in, you dipped it out. Do you think you'll ever go back and maybe do something later? So
it's always hard at first, and you're gonna have the same feeling you had when you first invested. That same I feel like I'm putting everything into this, but 5 years later you're a genius.
Yeah. So I'm just curious if you'll ever go back into it.
I certainly haven't ruled anything out right now. It's obviously first and foremost a family decision, what makes sense for my wife and I in order to maintain our living and hopefully grow it beyond what it is now. Yeah, it's something that if I still have a desire to diversify streams of income.
And I guess the question is, would you get excited about engineering something that's unique and crazy, maybe a little modern, something that would scratch that creative itch that you have?
Yeah, it all depends on what the situation is. I had just simple long-term rentals, sign a year lease, and hopefully sit back and just collect the rent every month. But yeah, I would certainly be open to, if we're looking at, my wife and I, we've talked about looking wherever we like to vacation, trying to find something there that we can reserve a couple of weeks and then maybe
have some renters to offset that income for the vacation rental.
Personally, I do skiing in the winter. I want to do I think if I do an investment, it'll be a ski investment. Like
Right.
somewhere near
A
a mountain.
chalet up in the mountains.
I don't know if it'd be a chalet, but it could be like a condo. Even if it's like a condo, a unit that's whatever, somewhere near a mountain that we can then use during, like I said, during certain times of the year. You go use it yourself, but then the rest of the time you have somebody manage it and whatever.
I love it, Paul.
Yeah.
But I want you to dream just a little bit bigger.
I know. I'm just saying that's one of the things. So I agree with Alan on that thought. That's one of the things I'm also thinking
Okay.
about. So just one of them.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to have something local too. I don't know. I think I'm leaning a little more towards like long term versus short term. Because short term, did you listen to our podcast where we had his wife on?
Yeah.
Who specializes in the short term rentals. So yeah, like it scares me a little because there's a lot of turnover and things you need to do like in between guests, and there can be some craziness that happens when you have a certain guest come in. I've heard stories.
Hey, I got them.
Yeah. So that scares me a little bit to where if I have something local, I think long term is probably the better play.
We had one of the rentals that it was the first couple of tenants that were in there were okay. And then one of them it ended up bad. And ultimately we ended up selling the house after we got them out of there. But, it took going to the court, getting an eviction. And once we got in the house to see it, like, my gosh, we ended up selling it as is. And thankfully the market was hot enough and it was a first time home buyer type house. So we had a market and we were able to unload it. But
Yeah.
Nick, getting
Silver
back to
lining
your
is.
getting back to your original question there, I think for me personally, the idea of rentals, I would entertain it absolutely. What I personally would love to do is to find a small plot of land that I can develop myself and
Yep.
act as a GC and build up, whether it's some townhomes that I would keep as a rental portfolio or just building up a six lot small community or something like that.
And sell it off.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that. I guess reeling back in and wrapping up with one final thought here from a client standpoint, give some words like we value your services. Like we
I already said I love.
So
yeah.
like our engineering partners they help us design. They help us make some decisions. They help us stay within certain budgets, or at least we try to.
Or even just the realm of reality, what's possible to do.
Yeah, so that's definitely our perspective. Like, what's just maybe some advice you could say about the general industry, maybe to the clients who are searching for engineers and architects specifically?
I think just going in with an open mind, not being too tied to what this vision is in your head. A lot of people with all the push to open concept and taking down walls. And
are we open yet? Did we open yesterday?
Yeah, I think we're going to have an episode on that soon if we haven't already recently. Danny?
Yeah. And a lot of times I'll go in there, yeah, you can do that, but you're talking a 20-foot span and it's carrying basically the bulk of your house. When your joists are only 2x10s, you're not going to find something that fits within the floor plan. So it's not going to be a smooth, flat ceiling. Yeah. But if that's what you've always had in your mind and you're not willing to accept anything other than that, not to say that, again, you can't switch materials and go to wood or steel versus wood. It just means that you have to be willing to accept the kind of, not, I don't want to say consequences, but the
difference in cost.
Yeah. And even how you build it too.
And certain contractors aren't going to, hey, I can do wood because I can put up one ply at a time and attach it together and it's all nails. Once I get into steel, I've got to get a welder out here and have and it's precise and I can't cut it to length. So your contractor is going to play a big role in that too.
Yeah. No, and a lot of times contractors are trying to stay in their wheelhouse, right? Just like investors stay within their buy box. You find a specific niche that you're good at and you try to stay inside of it. Unlike us, apparently.
As I say, I know contractors who hate pocket doors, for example. Can we put a pocket door here? No, absolutely not. Don't even think about it.
I was just talking to Scott about some new pocket door assemblies.
Yeah.
They're 3 or 4 times the cost, but they're fantastic. And it actually has a steel aluminum structure rather than that wood framed kit.
I was going to say, you mentioned advice to clients, keeping an open mind. I think that's definitely good words of wisdom there. But yeah, it's funny, even when we take the time to do whatever calculation and provide whatever information to them, they still push back sometimes where it's like, oh, does it really need to be this large it's really going to be 16 inches deep
And that's okay. Clients can push back.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's best to ask more questions to them. What's the biggest problem with this that you have for it? And if we can identify that and say, are you willing to spend more money to fix this issue, then we can address it.
Or use a different material or whatever.
If it's your dream home and it's obviously important to you, so you want to make it perfect.
And the other thing that I'll say is the structure, if you think about it, the structure is the most important thing in the house. It's what's keeping you safe, what's holding everything up.
Says the engineer.
But it's
To
all
be fair, that's very true.
but it's all hidden. So if you skimp on the structure and then you move on with the rest of the project, you cover it behind drywall, put cabinets on, and there's a failure because you wanted to save a couple of dollars by going with a smaller beam than what was recommended, then it's not just replacing that beam, it's uncovering everything else.
Yeah. I'll point out that we've had other clients that, I won't say the property location or anything like that, but they went into an attic space that was obviously not designed to hold what they put up there. And essentially you had a very small wood member that was supporting entire unit up there. And it was basically causing major issues structurally. Because like you said, you can't skimp. If it's not designed to hold the weight that you're putting on it or into it, you're going to have an issue. Be it in the foundation, be it in your wall system or your floor system, whatever it is, if it's not designed for it, you're going to have issues, period.
Yeah, and you're only as strong as your weakest link. You might want it to go in a certain direction, what we call load path, go from this member to that. If it ties into something that, even though it's not assumed to be a bearing element, if it's connected or resting on and crossing over, it may still impose load, which has the potential to cause deflection or movement within the structure below. Upsizing a member to make sure that it can span further, or that the term I like to use is perform. There's code requirements as far as what a minimum deflection is on a member, what the maximum deflection is on a member. And that's
floors actually move.
And that's something I've had people in the past that have come, oh, this floor is really shaky, or it's really bouncy, or it deflects a lot. And a lot of that, where'd you live in the past? Like, oh, I was a first floor apartment on a concrete slab. Wood is going to be a different member. It's got...
You mean concrete doesn't have any spring to it?
Yeah.
I will say this, on a lot of our flips and rentals, I'll reinforce, if we have a bathroom and a tile and everything on the second floor, I'll reinforce that floor.
Yeah, I was going to say extra members. We actually, our kitchen islands too, like we always note on our drawings for new builds to double up joists underneath of kitchen islands, for example. So again, like you have extra weight there. And like you said, there can be some actual give to it. It's the length over 360 or something like that, or 480?
Yeah, so you take your length in inches. So if a member is 20 feet long, then it's 240 inches. You divide it by 360, and that's going to give you an allowable of 2/3 of an inch.
Yeah.
That's a lot of deflection. So that's where performance comes in, and you'll want to increase the now each member has its own ability to resist that deflection, and just because you have a 20-foot member doesn't mean it's going to deflect that much, but you can tighten the spacing. You can use, like you said, double joist. You can do a lot of different things. Maybe there's a way that you can decrease the span of it somehow and reduce deflection. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do, especially on new builds. When you're getting into existing structures, there's a little bit less so. You're tied into the existing envelope.
Yeah. I'm curious too, does your subflooring that you select and how you secure it, does that help with some of the deflection too, like in a flooring system?
It's going to help a little bit with the deflection. You get what's called composite action, where you're looking not just as the joist, but you can actually include that subfloor as part of the deflection resisting or load resisting assembly. But what it does is actually the connection actually has more to do with the vibration, which is deflection and vibration are two different things. So when you think of the Jurassic Park moment, the water glass rattling on the island, that's vibration, not deflection. And that's going to be what you feel, what you perceive. There are ways to quantify that, but it's a difficult calculation. And it's not something that in the U.S., in Canada, you do have to design for it. In the U.S., we don't have any standards to design for vibration.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think I've ever had a thought about design or concern about vibrations or anything like that. Yeah.
But they are, they're two different elements, deflection and vibration, but they are linked together in some capacity. Vibration is resisted sheerly by mass. So if you put a heavier member in there, it's going to reduce the vibration. So
almost like a dampening.
And that's why a lot of times, in especially existing houses with open basements, you can go in there and put either 2x strapping underneath the joist, or even drywalling the ceiling under the floor will help the vibration. It won't do anything for your deflection, but it'll help the vibration because it's actually tying everything together better as a diaphragm, as an assembly.
As a completed assembly.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you know? I was gonna say, did you know
No,
about vibration? Your
that's
face
awesome.
is saying you didn't know about it
I
either.
know. I'm just like, this is awesome. Can we capitalize on this? Is there any way for us to design it and add value to our clients that other builders are not doing?
I think for me, the biggest value, and this is part of why I like doing what I do, is being able to have this type of conversation with the client to help them understand. I think the knowledge is the biggest thing that you can give to them, and also if you come with a proposal that says, I need joists at 16 inches on center here because of this reason, and a competitor comes in at 24 and say, this works, obviously 24 inch on center, less joist is going to be cheaper. But if you can give them that knowledge so they can make that educated decision, then hopefully they're going to be able to do so and have that understanding that while I may save money, it's going to cost me the performance, or that money is going to be worth it because I know I'm going to be.
Yeah, you can actually go over 24 inches as well, technically, right? By joist span charts, they have like a section that's over 24 inches. But,
yeah, but you have to have a thicker subfloor.
Yeah.
So most of it is either 5/8 subfloor or 3/4 inch, which, with lumber we save every penny. So that 3/4 inch is actually 23/32. That 32nd of an inch they figured out doesn't make difference, or they've increased the strength of it enough to give it that comparable value. And in the same way that a 2x4 isn't 2 inches by 4 inches.
Yeah.
But yeah, to go beyond 24 inches,
the strength is still similar. So in terms of the way they produce the lumber, it still has a comparable strength to a true 2x4. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like they figured out they can shave off a little bit.
I don't think
no,
so.
No, that's not the OSB, the sheathing.
Or the OSB sheathing.
That one, yes, they've done testing on that thinner section, that 23/32, and determined that based on whether it's the adhesive or the wood, and the strength of the wood that they're using, whatever the mechanism is, they've determined that's equivalent to a 3/4 inch performance.
Yeah.
But
so the 2x4 situation is more just cost savings.
I think that was just being able to get more sticks out of a log.
Yeah. Or the logs are smaller, right? So you get the same number, but the logs are smaller because
and the pine's less dense. It's growing faster these days.
Yeah, actually, in 2013 they devalued southern pine because they did some testing on it and realized that some of the values were 10 to 15% lower than what they had previously been reporting.
Yeah. So, and that's why I'm always interested in like new innovative ways that's better construction, obviously without breaking the bank. Especially if you are having an investment property, you're gonna want to defer that maintenance, do everything on it, and defer that maintenance for as long as possible, and build it the best you can, so that even down the road you won't have to worry about it, or when you're ready to sell, that won't be a pain point or a drop in value for you.
Or something for the buyer to point out. I would pay you what you're asking,
Sure.
but
I just think a lot of these bigger builders, they're buying and they're selling these houses right away. So they're like, how can we build a house to code, still to code, but basically at your minimum standards? And that's why it's like, have a conversation with your architect engineer. Maybe if we spend 10% more, how can we truly make a better house? And is it worth it if we're hanging on to this investment?
Yeah, I think that's always the difficult conversation. So especially with investors, they just don't, the 10%, it's like, oh, you're breaking the bank. It's crazy. Yeah, but I think you're right. Depending on the situation, how much value you're adding to it, what you're getting out of it, that 10% can make all the difference.
Yeah. Well, I think that was awesome. I had a fun time. Yeah. Paul, you have any final thoughts, questions? All right. Alan, thanks so much for joining us today. We had fun chatting.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
Guys, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
This has been the ArcFluence Podcast. Please subscribe on the platform of your choice and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. As always, you can get more information and additional content on arcfluence.com.